All right, let's jump right in. We're heading back to the late 19th century, and it's a really turbulent time. After the Civil War, there was this incredible moment of hope for African Americans, but that promise of freedom, well, it was starting to feel like a lie. So you have to ask, what went wrong? Well, you had this period called Reconstruction, where the federal government was supposed to be rebuilding the South and protecting civil rights. But then it just stopped. With the Compromise of 1877, federal troops pulled out, and basically 4 million newly freed black citizens were left high and dry. And in that vacuum, something awful rushed in, the era of Jim Crow. Finding a new path forward wasn't just an idea, it was a matter of survival. And yeah, survival was anything but a given. This wasn't just about changing laws on paper. We're talking about brutal, raw violence. Groups like the KKK were operating without consequence. Just look at that number, over 1,700 lynchings in just one decade. This was terror, plain and simple, designed to enforce a racial hierarchy and violently reverse any progress that had been made. And this sense of being an outcast in your own country, it was captured perfectly by the incredible scholar W.B. Du Bois. I mean, just think about that question. How can you be a stranger in your own home? Well, out of this crisis, two of America's most important black leaders emerged. And boy, did they have radically different answers to that question. And you really can't understand their ideas without understanding where they came from. Their backgrounds were just night and day. On one hand, you have Booker T. Washington. He was born into slavery in Virginia. He knew what bondage felt like in his bones. And then you have W.E.B. Du Bois, born a free man in Massachusetts, educated at Harvard. He absolutely experienced racism, but he saw it through the eyes of a Northern intellectual, not a Southern survivor. Okay, so let's start with Booker T. Washington's plan. You have to remember, his strategy came from a place of deep, harsh reality. He was looking at the violence in the South and thinking, what is the most practical, the safest way forward? For him, it was all about pragmatism. So in 1895, he gives this huge speech. It's now known as the Atlanta Compromise. And he basically lays out a deal. He says, look, let us get an education, let us get jobs, and in return, we'll hit pause on demanding things like political equality or an end to segregation. The idea was to calm things down, to prove that black people were a valuable, non-threatening part of the economy. And this whole approach, it got a name: accommodationism. The logic went something like this. If black communities could master trades, build businesses, and gain economic power, they would prove their worth. He believed demonstrating that economic value was the fastest and, maybe more importantly, the safest path to eventually earning full civil rights. And this wasn't just talk. Washington put this into practice at the famous Tuskegee Institute. The plan was super straightforward. Step 1, learn a skill, a real practical trade. Step 2, use that skill to start a business, achieve financial independence. Step 3, become so indispensable to the economy that white society has no choice but to respect you. He was convinced that once you had economic power, political rights would just follow. But not everyone was on board with this plan. Not by a long shot. Up in the North, a powerful intellectual voice rose up in opposition. W.E.B. Du Bois looked at Washington's plan and saw it not as a pragmatic path forward, but as a dangerous surrender. I mean, from Du Bois's perspective, how could you possibly wait for your rights when your community is being terrorized? How are you supposed to build wealth if you don't have legal protection, if you can't even vote to protect your life and property? He argued that giving up political power, even for a little while, was a huge mistake that would only invite more oppression. So he proposed a totally different model. Instead of Washington's bottom-up approach, Du Bois championed what he called the talented 10th. His idea was that a vanguard of the most intelligent, the most educated black leaders, the top 10%, had a duty to agitate, to protest, and to fight for the rights of everyone else. They would be the thinkers and activists who would tear down the walls of segregation. And his demands were direct. There was zero room for compromise. He wasn't proposing a bargain. He was demanding what the Constitution already guaranteed: an immediate end to segregation,
the right to vote for all, equal education. He was saying, these rights are ours, and we want them now.
So this is where you get this incredible clash of ideas. This wasn't just a friendly disagreement. These were two totally conflicting visions for the future of Black America. And you can just see the gap between them on every single issue. Education, Washington says teach them a trade. Du Bois says create leaders with a liberal arts education. Voting rights, Washington sees it as a prize to be earned later. Du Bois sees it as a non-negotiable tool for survival now. They were on opposite sides of, well, everything.
Now, here's the thing. This wasn't just some academic debate that fizzled out. It had massive, real-world consequences. Their competing ideas created these two powerful streams of thought that would flow right through the 20th century and directly shape the civil rights movement as we know it.
And these ideas quickly turned into real organizations. Du Bois's call for agitation led to the Niagara Movement. And then, boom, that evolves into the NAACP, the legal powerhouse that would fight segregation in the courts. Meanwhile, Washington's focus on economics inspired the creation of the National Urban League, which focused on jobs and opportunity. So what's the big takeaway here? In the end, it turns out the movement didn't have to choose one path. It needed both. The fight for justice required the economic strength that Washington talked about and the relentless political protest that Du Bois demanded. The two streams ended up merging into one powerful river of change.
And that really brings us right up to today, doesn't it? It leaves us with a huge question. Is progress best achieved by building economic power within the current system, or by demanding radical, immediate change to the system itself? This century-old debate between accommodation and agitation, between pragmatism and protest, is a conversation America is still having.